Hey, David. David,
Yes.
you look very, very.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. The 13th Annual Interfaith Poverty Conference. It's great to see everyone here. My name is David Valise. I'm the director and lead organizer for the Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty here in Rhode Island. And my heart is just warm to see everyone's faces. Thank you for being with us today. Before we start, I just want to take a moment because this is the first conference we've had since the pandemic to just really acknowledge the loss and the suffering that a lot of us personally have experienced and are still experiencing. My heart goes out to all the families and our hearts collectively. Hope for the day that we can join together and heal together in person. So thank you for being here with us. Couple of logistics really quickly. This will be recorded and shared. So if you have any questions that you haven't gotten answered, you will get answered, as well as any slides that we have that will get shared as well. We also want to say that if there are any press available that are here today, you can message us and we'll make sure to get your questions answered as well. I want to quickly thank some of our sponsors. If we're going to have a sponsor slide, I want to thank the Rhode Island Foundation for their continued support all these years to make that happen. Oh, we lost them. There we go. And I want to thank the Jewish Alliance too for their support and sponsorship all of these years as well. And as you can see from this really colorful, beautiful logo slide, we have a lot of great speakers and supporters today, including Temple Bethel and Temple Habonim, who are sharing some of their great staff and presenters and performers today. So thank you. I also want to thank our steering committee for the Interfaith Coalition, which is our next slide. I'm not going to read it out loud, but you can see we are a coalition of faith leaders, advocates, organizers, and activists who have come together to fight poverty and inequality in Rhode Island and believe we have a moral imperative to do better as a society. So thank you to our steering committee. I also want to take a moment to thank Alexa Tremblay, who's our press person and media person, as well as, as well as Joy Magnone, who is doing our wonderful Zoom tech. And if you have any issues, you can message her directly as well. Last announcement, I want to announce that we're actually moving our agenda a little bit because Bishop Barber, who we're all very excited to hear, got stuck at doing a voter suppression interview, which is a really important issue that we're supporting. So he's going to be on a little later. So we're just going to do our workshops first. We're going to have some speakers, then our workshops, and then Reverend Barber will join us after that, which is fine. We're all going to get through it. So first, as we always do, we want to start off this meeting with music, and we're very blessed today to have Cantor Judy Sepulwin with us from Temple Bethel, singing a song for us and to bring us into the space. So I'll let you go ahead, and you can unhighlight me now. I don't want to share the space. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, David. It's lovely to see everybody. I'm going to sing a song by Rabbi Menachem Creditor called Olam Chesed Yibaneh. We will build this world from love. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. I will build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love.
Thank you, Cantor Sepulwin. That was beautiful. And thank you for bringing us together in song as we share this moment. Thank you so much. Next, as we always do as well, we want to open this space up with some words that are centering and focusing us on the work ahead. So I'd like to introduce Reverend Howard Jenkins, who is the lead reverend for the Rhode Island Ministers Alliance and an advocate against inequality. I've seen him at several events, and I'm glad that he's with us here today to bless us with some words. Reverend?
Thank you for this opportunity. Let us bow our heads. Creator of all, who formed us in your image, we come together, different faiths and belief, yet we come like-minded on one accord to address the needs of your people. We are grateful for the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, for the clarion call has been heard, and we are here to respond. And so, dear Heavenly Father, we come with collective hearts and minds to equip ourselves for the challenge, to commit ourselves to do your will. We that are gathered here this morning understand the systemic barriers that has restricted and or limited individuals and families from achieving economic growth. Therefore, we ask that you, dear God, grant us wisdom to meet the needs of all your people, regardless of race, creed, faith, and non-belief, during these crucible of times. Heavenly Father, we also ask that you challenge us Challenge us to be the servants you have called us to be, that we are compelled and maintain the passion to make a difference in the lives of others. We ask that our faith remains deep-rooted in agape love, not stopping at specific goals that are accomplished, but that you, dear God, will give us an undying willingness to look beyond the obvious and continue to run an unprecedented race to change the life of others for the better. Your word tells us the race is not given to the swift, but the one who endures to the end. Let us run to the end with one voice, one goal, one concern, that being to be difference makers in the life of all people. This is our prayer. Let us together say, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Reverend Jenkins, for those powerful words and for unifying us today and for being with us as well. Thinking about the work that we're doing, mixing these intersections of faith and advocacy and poverty are really important to all of us here, working on anti-poverty initiatives. And I will say, one of the initiatives that one of the issues that we always hear about wherever we go, because they're all connected, obviously housing, poverty, racism, is food insecurity. We hear about it all the time. It's obviously we need to eat, people need to eat every day. And a lot of people are still struggling. That's why our next speaker, I'm very happy to have with us, Director for the Rhode Island Food Bank, Andrew Schiff, who's gonna give an update on hunger in Rhode Island and what we can do and what we need to do. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be given this time to talk about the problem of hunger in Rhode Island. 1 year ago, COVID-19 brought our lives to a standstill. It's been a year of loss and hardship for many Rhode Island families. The food bank and its network of food pantries and meal sites has served thousands of new people who never needed food assistance before, but now can't afford adequate food. We went from serving 53,000 people each month before the pandemic to 68,000 people each month during the pandemic. And to meet that high level of need, we're distributing a lot more food, millions of additional pounds. And we're indebted to the community-based organizations and congregations that kept their food pantries and meal sites open despite the risk of COVID-19. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our community partners for their extraordinary work over the past year, and along with all of the volunteers that make that work possible. In this most difficult of years, our work was complicated at the food bank by the fact that food donations decreased. The food industry and supermarkets have less surplus food to donate to food banks. So to meet the high demand for food assistance, we're purchasing more food than ever before, and that takes money. For 12 years, we petitioned the Rhode Island General Assembly to increase the state grant for the food bank from $175,000 to $350,000, strictly to be able to bring in more food. Fortunately, this year, the governor's proposed budget includes this increase for the food bank. Now it just has to be approved by the General Assembly. So you can help us by calling your state representative and senator and telling them that you support this increase for the food bank. That would be much appreciated. It is our moral duty to ensure that no one in Rhode Island goes hungry. Feeding the hungry is a moral issue. The problem of hunger is the political issue, best addressed by government policies. Hunger rooted in poverty is an economic issue, best addressed by increasing wages, tax credits, and affordable housing. And hunger is a matter of public health. COVID-19 has taught us that racial and ethnic disparities in food security have serious health consequences. During the pandemic, 1 in 4 Rhode Island households was food insecure, but the rate of food insecurity was even higher among Black and Latinx households, 1 in 3. And diet-related conditions that make COVID-19 more dangerous are common among food insecure adults. So if we want to achieve health equity, everyone needs access to nutritious food. And to be able to purchase healthy food in their community. COVID-19 also taught us the essential and unique role of government. In the worst days of the pandemic, massive government assistance was needed to prevent widespread hunger in Rhode Island. Between March and August of last year, low-income families in Rhode Island received $175 million in SNAP benefits and pandemic EBT benefits to be able to purchase food at the supermarket and grocery store. These nutrition programs were a lifeline for the people who were most harmed by COVID-19. Now, the Biden administration is taking steps to expand these programs and benefits. The American Rescue Plan that the president signed last month extends through September a 15% increase in SNAP benefits. We've been advocating for increased SNAP benefits for years. So it just goes to show advocacy pays off. And sometimes change really does happen, but we can't let up now. Economic recovery from this crisis is going to take time. So we have to insist that our political leaders make a sustained investment in these critical government nutrition programs. Let's use the lessons learned from the last year to create long-term solutions to the problem of hunger. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That's well said, and I hope that everyone listening heard that and will reach out to their elected officials and say we need more funding, sustained funding for the Rhode Island Food Bank. As someone like myself who grew up in poverty and relied on food pantries to survive, I thank you for your work, Andrew, and I thank all of those who are out there working in food pantries and direct services, giving food. I myself had a chance to work at a food pantry, and I'll tell you, there's something beautiful and powerful about handing somebody food. And that, I mean, that shouldn't exist in our society. We should not have hunger, but the fact that we have many people out there serving warms my heart. For those of you who have joined a little late, I want to make again the announcement that Bishop Barber is running a little late because he is fighting the good fight. So he will join us after the workshops. We're going to move the workshops up. We have wonderful workshops, so that's okay. And after the workshops, Reverend Bishop Barber will join us. So many of you already pre-assigned or pre-selected a workshop. So those people will automatically be put into the workshops. So we're going to transition into workshops now. If you haven't picked a workshop, we're going to show you how to do that now. And as well, if you're not sure how to do it or having problems, we're just going to put you in a wonderful workshop and you can then switch your workshop if you want to. Okay, so we're going to see you in a little while. We're going to send you off to the workshops and I hope to see you again. So now if you look at your Zoom screen at the bottom, you should see a little button for the workshops. And if you click it and you scroll over the name of the workshop, you will be able to pick the workshop that you want to, or the breakout room. Sorry, I should use breakout room. So let's start doing that now. If you click okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming back. And for, I hope the workshops went well. We're going to recap the workshops in a little bit. Right now, we are actually very excited that our keynote speaker is here and is going to join us and say a few words. I want to bring up Reverend Jenkins first, who's going to introduce Bishop Barber. Reverend Jenkins, please.
Thank you again. It is indeed an honor to introduce and present to others Bishop William J. Barber II, who is president and senior of the Lecture of Repairers of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He's also bishop with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, visiting professor of Union Theological Seminary, and pastor of the Greenleaf Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and the author of 3 books, Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing, The Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of New Justice Movement, and Forward Together, a Moral Message for the Nation. Bishop Barber is also the architect of Forward Together Moral Movement that gained national acclaim with its Moral Monday protests at the North Carolina General Assembly in 2013. These weekly actions drew tens of thousands of North Carolinians and other moral witnesses to the state legislature. More than 1,200 peaceful protesters were arrested, handcuffed, and jailed. On September 12, 2016, Bishop Dr. Barber led a Moral Day of Action, the largest coordinated action on state's capital in United States history, calling for state governors to embrace a moral public and policy agenda. On February 11, 2017, he also led the largest moral march in North Carolina state history, with over 80,000 people calling on North Carolina's elected officials to embrace a moral public policy agenda. Bishop Barber is a highly sought-after speaker who has given keynote addresses at hundreds of national and state conferences, including the 2016 Democratic National Convention. He has spoken to a wide variety of audiences, including in national unions, fraternities, sororities, motorcycle organizations, drug dealer conferences, women's groups, economic policy groups, voter registration advocates, LGBTQ, equality and justice groups, environmental and criminal justice groups, small organizing committees of domestic workers, fast food workers, and national gatherings of Christians, Muslims, Jews, and other people of faith. Again, Reverend Dr. Barber, Bishop Barber, served as president of the North Carolina NAACP, the largest state conference in the South from 2016 to 2006, to 2017, and currently sits on the National NAACP Board of Directors. A former Mel King Fellow at MIT, he is currently visiting professor of the Public Theological and Activism at Union Theological Seminary and is a senior fellow at Auburn Seminary. Bishop Reverend Dr. Barber is regularly featured in media outlets such as MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and the National Magazine, among other things. He is the 2015 recipient of the Puffin Award and the Franklin D. Roosevelt Four Freedoms Award, a 2018 MacArthur Foundation Genius Award recipient. And he is one of the 2019 recipients of the North Carolina Award, the state highest civilian honor. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce to us Bishop William Barber. Thank you.
And thank you so much to those of you in Rhode Island. David, thank you so much. Reverend, thank you so much for such a gracious introduction. I will tell my folk that I need them to make one correction. I've spoken a lot at drug dealer redemption conferences. but I am so honored to be with you all today. And I do apologize for the event I was at before you that they had some technical difficulties, but I'm honored to be here today. You know, when I think about what this interfaith body is doing today and how important it is, and I want to greet you on behalf of my co-chair, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, and the 41 state coordinating committees of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I hope many of you will join David and others in being a part of that movement. We're not an organization, we're an organism that's pulling people together around what we call fusion coalitions. And I want to certainly invite you to go to the website, www.breachrepairs.org and www.poorpeoplescampaign.org, and join us on Moral Mondays now. We're having National Moral Mondays every Monday at 3 o'clock. And in June, we will have a mass poor people, low wage workers assembly, moral march on Washington virtually. And then in 2022, we will actually have an in-person gathering. And I hope we can count on folk from all over the country as we put a face on poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, denial of healthcare, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And you'll hear more about that in the days to come. Because we have limited time, I want to move right into what I want to talk about. On the screen, you see two things: heal the nation and repairs of the breach. There's this ancient text that our rabbi brothers and sisters know about. They use it in Yom Kippur. Christian brothers and sisters, Muslim brothers and sisters, and others, we honor it. It's Isaiah 58. And it says something very clearly, because oftentimes you will hear politicians say, we want to be a repairer of the breach, but they don't read the whole text. The text says that we can be repairers of the breach if we stop exploitation in the workplace. In Hebrew, loose the brands of wickedness. And if we bring the poor into our space, and then God will hear our prayers, and we as a nation will be called repairers of the breach. It was right after the election that we took 32 people in to meet with the policy team, the president and the vice president. We said to them, we didn't want to meet right now with the president and vice president until after the inauguration, because after then we want to bring a group of poor, low wealth people to the White House to talk directly to them about the state of the nation even prior to the pandemic. As you know, even in Rhode Island, I was reading some stats just the other day about Rhode Island, and it clearly said that even in your state, prior to the pandemic, there were it would take 79 hours of work per week at a minimum wage just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. And in Rhode Island, 40% of your workforce makes less than $15 an hour. This was prior to the pandemic. And we met with the policy team and we said to them, if there's seriousness about healing the nation, then there are some clear steps that need to be taken. When I preached the inaugural sermon, it was interesting to me that the president's team chose Isaiah 58. I didn't choose it, they chose it. I just tried to exegete it and say what it meant to both him, the vice president, and the administration and the Congress, is that to be repairers of the breach, there are very specific steps. Today, I want to talk about those steps that we have presented before the nation if we're serious about healing the nation in this moment. The first thing we have to understand is that if we're serious, we have to know that if America does not address what's happening with visionary social and economic policy, the health and well-being of the nation is at stake. COVID has just exposed that, but it is at stake. What we need is long-term economic policy that establishes justice, promotes the general welfare, rejects decades of austerity, rejects the so-called neoliberalism and trickle down, and build strong social programs that lift society from the bottom up. We know going into this pandemic, we had 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country. For 43% of this country was poor and low wealth going into the pandemic. We know that systemic racism, even before the pandemic, in terms of voter suppression, disparities in income, disparities in wealth, were all existent before the pandemic. And so here's what we have said needs to happen for the healing of the nation. First of all, there are 14 steps right now we must take as a nation, and what we must fight for, we believe. The first one is to enact comprehensive, free, and just COVID relief. Comprehensive, free, and just COVID relief. What does that mean? It means we must mandate the collection and monitoring and reporting of this pandemic on race, ethnicity, and poverty and income. You know, right now they don't keep poverty stats on the impact of the pandemic. That must change. We must have equitable, free COVID-19 testing and treatment. We must have, including mental health care. We must guarantee the low wage and frontline workers. We were arguing that they should have been on the front lines first, the poor, low wealth workers, those people that had to go to work, who were the first to get sick, the first to get infected, the first to go to the hospital, the first to die. We must have targeted guaranteed access and education plan around the vaccines. We're seeing more of that now, but I want you to know we were pushing for this in December. And we need guaranteed and adequate income, including rapid and direct payments to all low wage and temporary workers for the duration of the crisis. I bring that up because I don't know if many people know that one of the industries hit the hardest during the pandemic was the restaurant industry. And the people that work in restaurants, they make $2.13 an hour plus tips. And 60% of them couldn't even qualify for unemployment because they don't make a large enough base salary. That is why we were pushing hard and continue to push that we cannot forget those who are at the bottom, but who are holding this economy up. We also need to continue to push for a national rent freeze and mortgage moratorium. We gotta increase SNAP. We've seen some of that in WIC and child tax credit and the EITC, earned income tax credit. And we saw some of that in the relief bill, but it's temporary. It must be permanent. We've got to push more rural money for rural hospitals and community health centers. That's one of the things we must keep an eye on in this relief package. We need permanent protections for Social Security, SSI, Medicaid, and Medicare. We have to have increased support for public schools to provide continuous, equitable, quality, remote learning access for the duration and to help recover, because many of our children have lost out during this period of time. And we must have student debt relief in a meaningful way. And these measures can't just stay in place for 6 months or a year. They need to be in place until the economy recovers all the way from the bottom up. This is what we must do if we're going to be repairers of the breach. Number two, we must guarantee health care for all, regardless of any pre-existing condition. It is a moral travesty that in the midst of this pandemic, we've not said as a nation, we're going to finally once and for all make healthcare connected to your body and not to your job. In the midst of a pandemic, we've not had a major transformation in the delivery of healthcare in this country. We who are people of faith, who know what real repairing of the breach is, we cannot back up on guaranteeing healthcare for all. We must raise the minimum wage to $15 as a minimum. Dr. King asked for it to be $2 in 1963, which would be $15 today. So we're 57 years too late. For Black people, it took us 400 years to get to $7.25. We cannot wait another 400 years. We got 62 million people in this country that make less than $17 an hour. The fight for 15 is all of our fights. And one of the most elitist, class-based, and racist things we saw recently is when 8 Democrats joined 49 Republicans on the Friday before Bloody Sunday and voted to kick not to allow $15 into the relief bill. A white woman from West Virginia, who's a poor and low wealth worker from Mansion State, said to me, Reverend Barber, why do they want us to die? Why won't they do right? She makes minimum wage, and she says every Monday we're so poor that we have Taco Monday. We sell tacos to each other so we can have a little kiddie fund to give to women who can't afford their feminine supplies. That should not exist. And yet we saw a senator like Manchin and others vote against their own people. There's no way we should be fighting 15. There's no way it should not have been in that relief bill. 15, if we had passed it immediately, if 15 was passed immediately, it would lift 49 million people out of poverty and low wealth immediately and pump 300 and some odd billion dollars into the economy. As a matter of our faith, we must end exploitation in the workplace if we're truly going to be repairers of the breach. We also have to update the poverty measure. The current poverty measure in this country is 50 some years too old. The current poverty measure says if you make $12,800 or so a year, you're not poor. The current poverty measure is used to deny the extent of poverty in this nation. That's why so many people will fight against raising the minimum wage, because their argument is at $7.25, that puts you $3,000 above the poverty level, because they say the poverty level is only $12,000 a year and $7.25 will give you $15. Well, we know that is not true. We need to use the supplemental poverty measurement, 200% of the supplemental poverty measurement as the true measurement of poverty in this country, because if we don't measure it right, will never provide and change the policies to meet the challenge that we face. Number 5, we must guarantee quality housing for all. We must guarantee, we must stop foreclosures and evictions immediately. We must enact a rent freeze, not just a moratorium, because the moratorium says you don't have to pay for 3 months, but then in the 4th month, you owe the 3 months you didn't pay, plus the 4th month. We must enact a federal jobs program to build investments in infrastructure and public institutions and climate resilience and energy efficiency and socially beneficial industries and jobs in poor and low wealth communities. Now, there are a lot of people that are saying this great, this relief, this infrastructure be a $2 trillion. Yes, that's great that we're having the conversation. Just like it was great that we're having a conversation about child poverty, but you cannot fix poverty just by giving child income tax credit if you don't give the parents money, living wages. And even with infrastructure, $2 trillion may not be enough. May not be enough, particularly if you're going to lift from the bottom, where the infrastructure must be targeted. We must have socially beneficial sectors. We must prioritize rural and urban areas that have been hit by deindustrialization and climate disasters and economic crisis. We must invest in environmentally sustainable infrastructure, jobs that expand and retrofit public and affordable housing, water, sanitation system, public transit, utilities, broadband access. So we look at this bill with a careful eye. The things that are good, we say it. The things that need to be more, we have to challenge it. We've got to convert vacant properties into affordable public housing. We've got to expand healthcare and public health infrastructure, training and capacity, including rural hospitals. We've got to repair and retrofit schools to be energy efficient, climate resilient. We have to have cultural training and production of arts and music and cultural works. And we must train and replace ICT and R&D and automation sectors. All of this must be a part. And we need to make the investment now. We need to demand that investment now. So we must take what's being proposed and examine it and always ask the question, how does it lift from the bottom? Number 7, we must protect and expand voting rights, not just in Georgia, but across the country. We must have a system of voting that's not so different in every state, but affords as much opportunity to vote as possible. Election day ought to be a holiday. And we must demand the restoration of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act that demands pre-clearance. Do you know all the laws we see happening in Georgia and particularly down south would not even make it if we had pre-clearance. But for over 2,800 days, over 7 years, McConnell and others have blocked through a filibuster any conversation about the Voting Rights Act. We, as people of faith, must declare that voting rights, to deny voting rights, is not just a Black issue, it's a theological issue. In fact, voting suppression may be targeted at Black people, but it hurts poor white people, it hurts the disabled, it hurts women, it hurts students. But more importantly, it's a theological issue for us, because the only people that can vote in this country are people. We do not give the right to vote to pets, parakeets, and puppies. We only give the right to vote to people. 18 years and older born or naturalized in this nation. So if you suppress my right to vote, you're suggesting bad English but good theology. I'm not a people. I'm not a person. You're suggesting that I'm not made in the image of God. And for us, that is idolatry. That is a form of supremacy that all of us, regardless of our color, ought to stand against. Then we've got to guarantee safe and quality public education. We also have to make sure that we have comprehensive and just immigration reform. We must ensure the rights of indigenous people. We must enact fair tax laws and use the tax code to address the issues of poverty. We must do that, and it must be made permanent. There's no way in the world we should have workers paying more percentage-wise than corporations. And we must redirect the bloated Pentagon budget. Do you know right now in this country, let me stand up just a second. Right now in this country, we spend almost $800 billion a year. It's actually 700 something billion. We're getting ready to propose another $715 billion in the war economy. The Pentagon hasn't been audited. The budget is bloated. We got a lot of outdated missile systems that continue to be funded. And if we cut our military budget in half, just say we did that, at $350 billion, we would still have more money in our military budget than China and Russia and North Korea and Iran and Iraq combined. Dr. King said any nation that continues to put more in its military budget and budgets of weapons than budgets that lift life is on a spiritual spiral downward towards spiritual death. And my brothers and sisters, all 14 of these things that I have mentioned, in part because of the time today, they're not far-fetched. They're not impossible. From the UN to the Eisenhower Institute, to the Institute for Policy Study, to the Economic Policy Institute, they all say the issue of scarcity is not the issue of America. The issue of scarcity of resources is not the issue. It's the scarcity of will. And only those of us like you, people of faith, the prophets born for this moment, can change the will of the nation. And that's why we're asking us to join together in some ways with this Poor People's Campaign, not as another organization, but we need a massive, generationally transformative gathering in Washington of poor and low wealth people who are at the mic, making the nation see the faces of poverty from Appalachia to Alabama, from California to the Carolinas, from Rhode Islands to the Hawaiian Islands. We need from Maine to Mississippi to put a face on poverty and to recognize that poor and low wealth people now make up a third of the electorate in this country. 65 million people, only 35 million voted in this past election, 6 million more than 2016. But 29 million didn't vote. And we did a study with Columbia University and asked the question, why? And the number one reason was they said nobody ever talks about poverty and low wealth when they run for office. And so we said, well, then maybe we can't wait on them to talk about it. We must talk about it and push it into the center of the political atmosphere of this country. Because poor and low wealth people now can determine who sits in the Senate, who sits in the White House, who sits in the state houses. But we must organize around an agenda. We can't really ask people to be political because they've too many times done that and seen people not respond around our own agenda. We call it more, mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating people for a movement who vote. But we also must put a face. For too long, poverty has been marginalized. That's why the powers that be use the government poverty measurement because it marginalizes poverty. It says, well, there's only 39 million poor people. That's all. There's only 39 million out of 300 and some odd million people. That's not a lot. Truth of the matter, after this pandemic, we are closer to 50%, nearly 50% of people in this country being poor and low wealth. Only 39% of Americans can afford a $1,000 emergency after this pandemic. Only 39. And our child poverty rates is the moral ugliness of our time, that we allow over 50%. And even recently, when they were saying that this new bill would end 50% of child poverty, no, it doesn't. First of all, because it's not temporary. And I told the administration, we love them, we thank God for what they did, but most of the stuff is not permanent, but it depends on how you measure poverty. And more importantly, how you measure desperation. Because if you say that people are out of poverty, children are out of poverty just because they're in a family of two that makes a little bit over $24,000 a year, then you don't understand the real pain of poverty in this nation. We must say to this nation, you can only be repairers of breach when we stop exploitation in the workplace and we bring the poor into the center of our consideration as a country and a nation. Our Constitution says you cannot get to domestic tranquility without going through the establishment of justice. You must establish justice first, then you have domestic tranquility, and then you hold on to it by providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and only then do you have a liberty that's worthy of being passed on to your posterity. So I close here, David, with a question I've been asking myself, that I've asked all my brothers and sisters to consider. Why are you alive after all this pandemic? You've been around it, I've been around it, surely. Why didn't you catch it? Why didn't you die? It can't be because I'm better than the people that died. Can't be because God loves me more than he loved them. Why? I've been struggling with that question, the question of my own mortality, the question of our mortality. Why? I mean, I've been thinking about it more than I think about it with death threats. One time we were headed to a place and to do a poor people's campaign, and we got a note that said, if you come here, we'll make sure you drown in your own blood. But that, I just kind of dismissed that. But this pandemic, why is it, am I looking at you today on this screen? Why are you looking at me? Because every one of us has been somewhere in the air around COVID. And the Spirit dawned on me, Reverend Howard, and said, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe that's really the wrong question, not why am I alive, but what am I going to do with it? How am I going to honor all those that died? Those 60% of the people who shouldn't have died in the first place, the majority of them being poor and low wealth. What am I going to do with the breath I have left? Because the truth of the matter is 6 minutes without breath is over for most of us anyway. So maybe the question is not why, but what are we going to do with the 6 minutes, the 6 hours, the 6 days, the 6 weeks, the 6 months, the 6 years, or the 60 years that we have left? And could it be that the only thing that's worthy of us living now is to join Isaiah and cry loud and spare not and say to the nation, God is not so much interested in all of your ritual. God is interested in righteousness and justice. And we can be a nation that repairs the breaches, but only if we start from the bottom up and lift the poor and low wealth. That's the conclusion I've come to. Each of us need to wrestle with our own, but I pray that you will use your breath every day to sound the trumpet and never sound retreat until we see breaches repaired. And even if we don't do them all before we die, or even if all doesn't happen before the kingdom finally comes, I'd rather be on the side of those that tried than to waste what breath we have left saying nothing and doing nothing, or worse yet, believing that nothing is possible. I know you're the people that believe it's possible. Let us join our breaths together and breathe a mighty wind of transformation all across this country. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Barber, for your powerful, meaningful words. You and the movement are an inspiration to us all, and a reminder that we have a lot of work to do. From the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, we thank you so much for being with us today. I'm actually, yeah, and as you said earlier on, before you began your speech, I can't wait for the day that you will join us in Rhode Island in person, and we can all walk together to the State House and demand these rights. I hope you had a chance to enjoy the refreshments we put out in the back. Sorry, that's an ongoing Rhode Island joke, but thank you so much for being here. I'm not only the Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty director, but I'm also very fortunate to be on the steering committee for the Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign. So actually, I wanted to have a moment to be able to plug the Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign. We're pulling up our slide now. Not only is it a national movement, but like Bishop Barber mentioned, Rhode Island is not missing. If we could go back to there you go. Oh, there it is. Rhode Island has its own inequality. We have a lot of food inequality, housing inequality. People are struggling. We still haven't passed the legislation that we need. So not only is it a national movement, but a local movement. And the Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign here is trying to do the national work, but also connect people to local advocacy issues. This is our website and our Facebook. And I wanted you all to have a chance to save the date, because on March 3rd, we're going to be having a Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign event at the State House to continue the work that Bishop Barber and the national campaign is doing. The Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty is happy to be a partner with the Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign to continue that work as we fight for equality and move towards justice. So thank you again to Bishop Barber and to all the people that made his speech happen. We still have a little bit, I'm looking at the time, but we still have wonderful things to do for the time that we have left. I wanted to bring Rabbi Sarah Mack and Reverend Chantal Washington, who will be leading us and checking in our workshops. Apologies if the workshops got cut off short. We had to obviously hear our wonderful speaker. So if we could check in, Chantal, I see you're driving. Reverend Washington, just make sure you're safe. And go ahead. Let's check in with our workshops to see what we learned.
Wow, wonderful. And so as we all sort of catch our breath and really embrace that incredible message from Bishop Barber, and sit with that question, how are we going to use our breath? Reverend Washington and I are here to really turn the light on our smaller breakout groups and to hear, you know, what are the ways in which we can step forward and do that. And as we read in Isaiah 58, step forward and say, Hineni, here I am to do the work. And so I will invite each group to just give us a small a snippet of the what we can do, the how that went on in each session. And I wonder if from the Raising Rhode Island group, Linda, are you able to just, or Senator Murray, can one of you give us just a tiny nugget to share with the larger group?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And Senator Murray, if you want to join in, that's great. First, I want to thank Desire Barrett and Savannah Noe, who are parents who receive cash assistance benefits through the Rhode Island Works program, for sharing their stories. And I think it just blended so well with what Bishop Barber just talked about in terms of needing to see the faces and the power of people who are living in poverty. So our workshop was about the Raising Rhode Island Coalition and our efforts to increase the Rhode Island Works benefit for our poorest children in the state, to help lift them not out of poverty, sadly, but just out of deep poverty. And so we would encourage folks to go to the raisingri.org website to find out more information about the campaign. The bills that would raise the benefit and provide clothing allowance and promote long-term economic security have been heard in the House and Senate, but our march is to make sure that we get this enacted as part of the budget. So I just want to thank everybody who participated in the workshop. It was great to see old and new faces, and we'll move forward. We're going to continue down the road.
Yeah, just to echo what Linda has said, and for those of you that aren't aware, the Rhode Island Works program cash assistance amount has not been increased in 30 years. I've said that so many times, and still every single time that I say it, it is still is shocking, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing. We have the funds to do this. We can use TANF funds. It's not about having the money. It is about prioritizing these families, prioritizing these children, expanding also the clothing allowance, which children and infants and toddlers do not qualify for the clothing allowance. And there are many other facets of this bill that you can go to raisingri.org to learn more about it. And I would just implore you to reach out to your elected officials, your senators, your representatives, because there are families in this program from every single district. And so this affects everyone. And I would just urge you to reach out to them and let them know that this is a priority for you, and ask them to go to Senate leadership or go to House leadership to let leadership know that this is a priority for your state rep or senator as well.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Would we have someone who could give us a small excerpt of what happened in the housing workshop? Next. Housing.
Sure. This is Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser from the coalition, and we had two wonderful speakers, Katie West of Homes RI and Christina Contreras Fox of the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. I'm going to put the links for their websites in the chat. And we had a great discussion about bills that are currently in the state legislature. First of all, we had a big victory in the state legislature, not in the state legislature, but on the ballot just a couple of months ago with the passing of the housing bond that's going to create some funding for creation of housing in Rhode Island, but it's not enough. There's still a lot that we need to do. We are hoping that today will be the final vote on the source of income housing bill. That would make it illegal in Rhode Island to discriminate against people who use a federal housing voucher to have a home for themselves and for their family. Right now in Rhode Island, it's legal for landlords to say, oh, you have a housing voucher? No, thank you, I'm not going to rent to you. Or, oh, you're receiving your money from alimony payments or from military retirement payments? No, thank you. I want someone who makes their money on a salary. That will be illegal in Rhode Island when we get the source of income housing bill passed. Hopefully, that's going to be passed today in the final vote in the General Assembly. Also, this year, we're looking for creation of a housing production fund to increase the amount of funding that we have and have a vehicle for permanently funding that, so we don't have to go begging every time that we need money to create housing in the state. We also need to pass some eviction protections in Rhode Island to protect people from being unfairly tossed out of their homes, and especially in the crisis situation that we're facing right now during the pandemic, we need those protections for people so that they're not thrown out of their homes in the cycle of poverty that can be initiated when people lose their homes. We also talked some about federal legislation. I won't talk too much about that because actually Bishop Barber mentioned a bunch of the bills that we're looking for on the federal level, including also nationally having source of income protection nationally, permanent funding for housing choice vouchers, expanding the Housing Trust Fund, and also Eviction Crisis Act to prevent people on a national level from being evicted from their homes. And I'll invite Christina and Katie if you have anything to add to that, but we had a really great breakout group.
Sure. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And it's an honor to be here again today. I'll just add that in our call to action, we talked about really the need to promote the recent federal rent and utility assistance program that's come to, funds have come to Rhode Island as part of recent COVID relief packages. So I'll put the website in the chat. It's rentreliefri.com. And please spread the word if you are leading a congregation. It's important that people know that this assistance is available, and there's a lot more money this time. So folks who got left behind before, there's more funds available this round, and we want to make sure that it's accessible to people who speak languages other than English or maybe can't access the technology. So we're here to help with that, but just want to get the word out. And also, we talked about the power of the faith community, and this is a theme throughout how important it is for legislators to hear from their constituents. And so if folks are interested in engaging, please reach out to Homes RI, things like letter writing campaigns, emailing, organizing actions. We're happy to help support that. And we're just available, and thank you all for your gracious presence today.
Thank you. I just have one other thing to add. So as we've covered then and just now, to address our housing crisis in Rhode Island and to end and prevent homelessness, we need an adequate, a real supply of safe and affordable homes. We need to remove barriers that keep people from accessing housing. So banning discrimination based on source of income, which is really going to be having its final yes vote in the Assembly today after 5 long years of trying to move that forward. Big thank you to the bill sponsors, Chairwoman Anastasia Williams, excuse me, and Senator Megan Coleman. Also, former Senator Metz championed this bill for years, so huge thank you to him as well. But another piece, particularly when it comes to ending and preventing homelessness, is providing permanent supportive housing for our most high acuity neighbors, our neighbors most in need, excuse me, because permanent supportive housing is the best intervention to help chronically homeless Rhode Islanders. It's permanent affordable housing paired with wraparound community-based resources and supports. There's a bill in front of the General Assembly that would bring 125 vouchers for permanent supportive housing into Rhode Island. It's called the Rhode Island Pay for Success Act. It's House Bill 5788, Senate Bill 0371, sponsored by Rep. Liana Kassar and Chairman Josh Miller. So this is another piece of legislation that's before the General Assembly this session, which is really, really important. And we need your help to make sure that it moves forward because, excuse me, if we don't advance this, Rhode Island actually got about $1 million in funding from HUD and the Department of Justice to run this pilot project. And if we don't pass this particular piece of legislation, HUD's going to take that money back and just redistribute it to another state. So every single federal dollar that we have that's going to come in to help our fellow Rhode Islanders, it's good, but we need to let the General Assembly know how important it is that they act. And I'm going to put more information about Pay for Success here, but all of these bills that we talked about are so important. They work together to address this problem. right? An intersectional problem requires an intersectional solution. And if we're not addressing all these different pieces, then we're not making the difference that we need to. And that's really, really important when it comes, that's really important to be mindful of when it comes to helping people meet basic needs, the most basic and fundamental of which is housing.
Sorry. Thank you so much for all of that, all of you. If we could have someone who was part of the immigrant rights workshop to present a snippet of what happened in that workshop, we'd be grateful for that.
I can speak for the immigrant rights advocacy presentations. My name is Arely Diaz. I am with the Alliance to Mobilize Our Resistance, known as AMOR. And for our session, Karina Valencia and I from the Immigrant Coalition talked about access to 3 different things. We did talk about access to housing for immigrant and undocumented communities, access to transportation, and access to healthcare. We broke down different ways that people, right, that are living in poverty or are low income, but then are also intersect, right, by also being undocumented, have additional barriers to different programs, different resources and services, including those from the federal government that folks that are citizens have access to. And we talked a little bit about as well how it's not just the undocumented population, but folks that are legal permanent residents or people that are green card holders, as they call, as sometimes they're known, also don't have access to some of these programs and services, which limits even the ability for some citizen children to get access to things for fear of adults wanting to change their status and later on being affected by accessing services and programs. For housing in specific, I think, I want to uplift everything that the folks from the housing advocacy group said. And I think, for undocumented communities, we've been trying to do mutual aid paired with, the We Are One fund that the Rhode Island launched last year that supported a good amount of undocumented community family members, but we do know that it's not enough, right? Especially for housing, for people that have not been able to pay their rent for a lot of months and are very much afraid of what might happen, and sometimes are not totally protected by things like the eviction moratorium due to informal negotiations or contracts with landlords or on-site, sub-landlords in their apartment complexes. For transportation, we talked about our effort, our multi-year effort for the driver's licenses for all campaign. This is something that's been in the works for a very long time, and we've been trying to pass legislation around this that would create driver's licenses that do not require social security numbers. As we know, it's very difficult to get around Rhode Island without a car. It's definitely possible, but considering we are in a pandemic, right, the access to transportation is so much more critical, right, to get to a COVID test site, to get to the grocery store safely, to participate in gig economies if possible. So I think, and I think all the folks in the Immigrant Coalition as well are really pushing for it to be this be the year, right, that we get this passed. There's currently a bill in the House and in the Senate that we testified for these past few weeks, and we are hoping that you will also join us in supporting the driver's licenses for all campaign and making sure that folks can drive without fear, including young folks, middle-aged folks, older folks, right, that do not have access to this. And finally, we talked about access to healthcare. Right now, there's a focus on expanding access to healthcare for children and mothers, particularly immigrant mothers and undocumented children. That is also something that has legislation attached to it. And we can provide some resources that can be shared with the attendance of the conference. But there's two bills that will be up for a hearing soon, and that you can all testify either verbally or through written form. And we do encourage, and please ask that you do, so that we can expand the access of for this population. Because considering right now, again, we are in a pandemic, we need access to healthcare now more than ever for the immigrant and undocumented population. And that's something tangible that you can do to support that. Karina, do you want to add anything else?
No, just to amplify everything Adelie said. That was a great summary of what we spoke about, and thank you.
Yes, I want to thank to this wonderful John Lady that shared with us very good information about this issue, immigration rights and advocacy. And they showed us that there are a lot of opportunities for many people to be engaged. They are part of one red of organization that are working right here in Rhode Island, in our state, in Providence, in our different cities. One way that you can support, that you can be engaged is supporting the different bills that are in place. And to be connected with our people, especially immigrants that need our accompaniment. So thank you again to everybody that was part of this discussion today.
Thank you. It's now our pleasure to introduce Dr. Wendy Ibrahim, a dear friend and representing the Rhode Island Council of Muslim Advancement, who will present for us a closing prayer.
Thank you. Some of you may be aware that today is the first day of our most holy month of Ramadan for the 1.8 billion Muslims around the world. If you do know about Ramadan, you may know that it's the month of fasting. It is also a month of charity and community building and growing our relationship with God. And as I was listening today about this crisis of morality that we're having and this social divide that we're experiencing and this economic divide that we're experiencing, I hold a prayer in my heart during this holy month of Ramadan that we can choose the right thing, that we can move in the direction of seeing the sacred in our own hearts and seeing the sacred in the hearts of each other. And to that end, I have chosen a poem written by Sufi poet Aru Barzak, and I'm going to read it for you today. The God who made the stars, the seas, the mountains and its peaks, the universe and its galaxies, felt this world would be incomplete without you and without me. Do you see how you are a puzzle piece in the whole? How without you here, there would be a hole? Your body is not just a clay tent that you live in. It's a piece of the universe you have been given. You are not a small star. You are a reflection of the entire cosmos. Can you hear the Big Bang in your heart? 80 times a minute, God knocks on the doors of your chest to remind you that he has never left and that he is closer to you than the jugular vein in your neck. And we hear that in chapter 50, verse 16 of the Holy Quran. Every moment is divinely blessed. For this very moment, God is blowing the breath of life through 8 billion different human chests. You're not just star and dust. You're a reflection of God's beauty on earth. You are not this mortal body that death will one day take. You are an everlasting spirit held in the mortal embrace of clay. You are not a human being meant to be spiritual. You are a spiritual being living this human being miracle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Sorry, Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you also to Reverend Washington and Rabbi Mack. Before, and all of our wonderful workshop presenters who you will get to see again when we share the Poverty Conference with you. Before we have our closing song and end this, I just wanted to have a chance to thank all of our speakers and also pull up a couple of slides that will close this out for us. So the Interfaith Coalition, you've heard a lot of the advocacy campaigns that we have and how you can get involved. Here are some of the issues that we've been working on this year, including a lot of the workshops that you have seen. I ask you to please go to our website, our Facebook, to get involved. We have heard a lot of bills so far this year, but there's still a lot of work to do. So please go to our website, go to our Facebook. You can sign up for our newsletter and hear about all of the different advocacy campaigns that we have coming up. Next, I want to just highlight two campaigns that weren't really spoken about very shortly, because I know we're late on time. But these campaigns are campaigns that are really close to our heart. We're working on creating a just tax system in Rhode Island, where we would have people who are making a lot more money pay their fair share. And this is, if you go to the website, therevenueforrhodeisland.org, you can learn about this campaign and join us to support legislation that will be happening soon. It's a really important one. As you could see, poor people are paying a lot higher tax rate. The next campaign, really quickly, that we really cared about this year, more, I think very important, is passing the Nursing Home Staffing and Quality Act. We wanted to support our nursing home workers and residents by making sure that they are properly paid and also have the staffing levels that they need. You can go to raisethebar.ri.org to learn more about the campaign and how to support it. You can also, when you go to raisingthebar.ri.org, you can click to call your representatives to make sure that they pass this legislation now, because we need it. Nursing home workers need it, and Rhode Island needs it. So please support those campaigns and all the other campaigns we mentioned. Now I have the pleasure to thank everyone for coming and introduce our last person who's going to share with us, David Perelman, I think is the right way to say your name, who's going to lead us out in song. And thank you, David, for being with us. David comes to us from Temple Habonim. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, and to all of the presenters, excuse me, and especially to the Reverend William Barber, who I've had the pleasure of seeing a few times in person, and is always equally as inspiring. Although some of the things you shared with me did hit me like a dagger the way that they're supposed to. So I thank you for bringing our attention to that today, and to really everybody for the inspiring words that you've said, and the ability to use the inertia of this woke movement to push our world forward and to allow it to be better than it is today. If you're sitting in this room, that means you're a person of privilege in some way, shape, or form, and we all have the obligation to use our voice in the way that we need to make our world better. This isn't usually a call and response song, so if you want to do that on your own at home, that's absolutely great. And if you don't want to, just enjoy. I will open my eyes, I will open my eyes, I will not look away. I will use this gift I've been given every day. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I will fight for, I will give of myself, I will give of myself, and I will reach out my hand. I will use this heart I've been given to take a stand. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. And I will fight for the truth. I will stand up for what's right. I will use this strength I've been given to be alive. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Sing with me. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. Our voices can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. My voice can change the world.